If your tires are so old, they literally remember the Alamo, that's a big O no. Thankfully, for all your car's big O no's, there's always a big O yes. Now through December 31st at participating Big O tires, save $70 instantly on sets of 4 Continental, Cooper, Goodyear, or Yokohama brand tires with paid installation purchase. Not valid with other offers. Disposal fees extra and up to 10% shop fee based on non-discounted regular retail price not to exceed $35 where permitted. See store for details.
Welcome to Red Zone Extra on Facebook Live, Chiefs Playoff Edition. We've been waiting all season to say Chiefs Playoff Edition, and here it is. It's here. Let me introduce you to the gang. To my far left is Sam Mellinger. Next to him, Vahe Gregorian. Stand up, Vahe. I've got Sam McDowell here, and Herbie Teope, who I predict will leave with fewer teeth than when he arrived because he loves candy corn.
It's a new year, but you know what? Candy corn still rocks. Thank you to our #1 fans, courtesy of Jack and Ann Weaver. Off to the side, they're behind the camera right now, but thank you guys for the candy corn.
Yeah. You know, that's the great thing about the candy corn is that Herbie doesn't need to share that with anyone. He can have the whole bag to himself. You all know the drill here. We talk Chiefs and we take your questions and try to get to as many of them as we can. We are coming at you from Big O Tires. A Big O Tires so nice that we've been here twice. 118-15, 3 times?
3 times.
We've been here thrice. That's right. 118-15 South Black Bob Road in Olathe. Kind of like it's our home Big O Tires, isn't it?
It has been.
For some of us.
One of ours. Yeah, right.
For all one of us. So we are going to talk Chiefs, and I thought what we do today is we put together a special section for the Star. It'll be the Sunday print editions. A lot of the stories are on kansascity.com right now and accessible through the Red Zone Extra app. But I thought what we do is kind of get into some of the topics that we covered in these special section stories. They're all, relevant to the game on Sunday against the Houston Texans, 2 o'clock kick at Arrowhead Stadium. Herbie, we'll start with you because it involves, we always like to kind of start this with injuries and news updates. And you wrote about the Juan Thornhill injury and how that might impact the Chiefs. You were going to write about the Chiefs the Texans passing game and Armani Watts and how he figures in. Just take us through what you wrote and how do you think the Juan Thornhill injury is going to affect the Chiefs?
Well, the Juan Thornhill injury is going to affect the Chiefs because it's a big injury. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that Thornhill and Tyrann Mathieu, those two on the back end of coverage, helped turn around what was a pass defense that ranked 31st last year. They finished the 2019 season ranked 8th in the league. The Chiefs have options right now, and I know you wrote about Kendall Fuller and Armani Watts, who I spoke to Wednesday in the locker room, says, hey, if he gets the call, he's ready to step in right now. He knows he played 48 defensive snaps the season finale after Thornhill went down, but he says, hey, I've played on special teams, and playing on special teams allows me to see the field faster. And he basically reinforced what Coach Andy Reid said on Monday when I asked him about that. And he said, special teams helps especially young linebackers and young defensive backs play fast when it translates over to defense. I think the Chiefs are going to be well covered back there on the back end of coverage because you still have Mathieu back there. Fuller is versatile, can play both positions, and then you have a young guy in Armani Watts.
Well, and Watts, only his second year with the Chiefs, played only 5 games as a rookie, and then he was injured. It was a groin or a hand, I can't remember what it was. But anyway, missed the final 3 months of the season, didn't play in the playoffs. But got snaps against the Chargers in the regular season finale. So you're comfortable, you think, because I think the Thornhill injury not only affects who's going to replace him, but it does affect Tyrann Mathieu. I think Thornhill's ability, his improvement throughout the season and playing center field allowed Tyrann Mathieu to freelance a little bit and have the second half of the season that got him All-Pro mentioned. What do you think, Sam? Is this this seems to be an impactful injury? One of the guys that you don't, if you had to list in order guys you don't want to see injured and miss the playoffs, he'd be up there pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'd be after there's a tier, right, with the quarterback,
Yeah.
and then there's probably a couple blank tiers after that, and then there's a tier with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. I would put Matthew in there, Chris Jones. But I think the next one down, I think, is Juan Thornhill for a lot of reasons, including what you just said. I think he has freed up Tyrann Mathieu. I think Tyrann Mathieu has been better the second half of the season. He's been good all season, but I think he's been more excellent the second half of the season than the first. And I draw a connection there between Juan Thornhill's improvement and freeing up Tyrann Mathieu. The play that sticks out the most, and it's one play, but I think it's illustrative of some other things, is that interception against Oakland and the second Oakland game, which was week 13, something like that. Where his guy was running a post, and he left him because he knew Juan Thornhill had his back, and he made the interception on, I forgot who the receiver was, but running it out.
Yeah,
and that kind of thing. I think the Chiefs are relatively insulated against a Thornhill injury with Watts and Kendall Fuller already having transitioned to safety. But I think it's a major step. If nothing else, it's a huge question mark. And this is a bad team to be having that question mark at that position, because they are really good with the deep ball. Deshaun Watson has been really dangerous throwing deep, and especially so when he's got all his receivers.
Which he'll have.
Yeah,
They're
Stills
getting
and
their
Fuller.
back.
Yeah, when he's got all three of those guys, Stills, Fuller, and of course DeAndre Hopkins might be the best receiver in football. When he's got all three of those guys, he's particularly dangerous with the deep ball. I think that's absolutely something to watch.
If I can add a
this
point
weekend.
to what Sam's mentioning here, I think the Chiefs signaled their confidence in Kendall Fuller and Armani Watts because they had 2 weeks to make a roster move.
That's true.
They could have bolstered that defensive back position, but they didn't. They just placed Thornhill on injured reserve and activated Ryan Hunter from the practice squad. They did not address the safety group. So that signals they are comfortable with Fuller and Watts.
And brought up a running back, I noticed, for the practice squad.
For the practice
Second
squad, correct.
running back. Kyle Coffey beat me to the punch here, was asking about, speaking of injuries, Travis Kelce showing up on the injury report yesterday. What's going on there? Of course, we don't know anything. Nobody knew about Kelce's knee injury until the practice report was issued late on Wednesday, which made him was it a limited participant yesterday? You wrote the story, Sam. What to make of this?
Yeah. First of all, I hope nobody takes you out of context with, of course, we don't know anything. But he did practice limited, so I don't know that it's a major concern about him missing Sunday's game, and maybe you disagree, but everybody's kind of dealing with something this time of year, and he was out there during the portion that was open to media and stretching and doing all that work. So I would be still surprised if it was something serious enough to keep him out on Sunday.
What's interesting is that Andy made a point of announcing at the start of his news conference
Everybody
before
healthy.
practice how healthy they are. And I don't imagine that I guess those two can coexist. I mean, that they're healthy and Travis was going to be limited. But do we think there's a chance that developed in the time after?
Well, what he said was everybody will practice. He didn't say everybody will practice fully. So, I mean, there's some room in there.
Yeah, there is. Andy takes advantage of that room.
He does.
Yeah.
He'll get that to us.
I wondered, the skeptic in me, if there's a little gamesmanship going on here with the injury
Could be.
report, kind of a la Patriots, maybe sneaking a guy on there that, here Travis Kelce's been played every snap. I'm sure he's had his bumps and bruises all year, but
For sure.
one of the few stars on the team that hasn't missed any time because of an injury. Let's
That's a good
put
point.
put that seed in, plant that seed for the Texans.
And if there's one guy that you kind of trust to just be there Sunday, it's probably that guy.
Right,
That's
right.
been in this offense for so many years.
But as Herbie's reminded us throughout the year, the injury report, the Thursday and the Friday injury reports are the ones to really pay close attention to. So, as I said, we're going to talk about some of the stories that you will read either in the Sunday print editions of the Kansas City Star or online at kansascity.com now. Vahe, let's start with you. You wrote a story that we've talked about a lot over the, as the Chiefs have built this Andy Reid, program, and the fact that we all covered the Royals in 2014 and 2015, their championship run. There's a similar feeling to it, isn't there?
There is a similar feeling, and as so often happens when you have a theory and you run it by Dustin Colquitt, he leads you in a direction that helps. And so without giving away too much of the story, I spoke with him, and he immediately went into some of the comparisons, including being summoned into Ned Yost's office last summer, along with Patrick and Travis Kelce, and being told that this is the same thing by Ned, who called me back in the office yesterday, and in my hurry to go off to a side room to talk to Ned, Sam McDowell ran over to me with my tape recorder to make sure I could keep pace with Ned. So it became a fun story to work on. And rest assured that Andy Reid is Ned Yost's coach, Patrick Mahomes is Ned Yost's quarterback, and Sam Mellinger is not Ned Yost's columnist. No, I'm kidding. And I'm rambling, so too much coffee early. Also, I'm making up for sitting way down here.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Insecurities.
you've got to speak louder so we can all hear you from down there.
Why did you get the small chair?
Because I took the time to go talk to Ann and Jack while some people here were moving chairs around, apparently.
What about the build-up to what the Royals accomplished in those 2 years?
Look, the real point here is the way each season ended, right? With just this, close as can be to something incredibly special. I know it's different to win the World Series than to go to the Super Bowl, but I think in certain ways that parallel holds up pretty well. It would be pretty euphoric for the Chiefs just to get to the Super Bowl. So we all remember Alex Gordon stranded on third base, Game 7 in 2014, and certainly all remember Dee Ford and the coin toss last year. And the question becomes, do you build off that? Do you get a hunger from that? Do you get experience from that's relevant? I very much see the parallels, and also each thing is its own story. I mean, this could become something that resonates more as we go forward, or something that falls flat immediately on Sunday.
Well, they kind of have to get to the Super Bowl to complete the parallel, right?
At least, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The fan experience is really similar, right? Like, the big difference, of course, is that the Chiefs have been good before, and the Royals had 29 years of not just being bad, but just being hopeless.
29 years of stink.
Most of those years. So like the Royals never bothered to raise your hopes. The Chiefs would raise those hopes and then punch you in every part of your body for having the nerve to believe. So that's the one. But there's a similar kind of fan experience. And the rebuild, I think, like, the once Hosmer, Perez, those guys came up, maybe that's the comparison, right? Between once Mahomes became the quarterback.
All of those guys.
Look, there's actually more to be said on it. In fact, you should quote yourself when you write chapter 2 on the fan experience. That raise them up to punch them. You may have said that in as many words before, but
probably.
But there is more to be explored there on those very points. Especially, I think we'll be spending a lot of time on the fan experience in the weeks to come if they win this one.
Yeah. For sure. Sam, you got after the idea of Patrick Mahomes as a kind of not lost in the shuffle. That's a little too strong, but after following his MVP season of 2018, he's not going to be the MVP in 2019. Which I don't know. I kind of thought once he got that, he would be the MVP every year for the rest of his career. Because that's the way it goes, right?
It's a huge letdown.
It really is. I mean, it's like I was saying the other day. I think the Chiefs really start looking at watch the national championship game on on Monday night. Just start looking, plant the seed. They
have to trade up again to get the guy they want.
Right. But no, you make the point where he's just not the flavor of the moment right now, nationally.
Yeah, I mean, like what strikes me, this has jumped out pretty much all of the season. Lamar Jackson is exactly what Patrick Mahomes was last year. He is, sort of revolutionized. Like he's dominating at that position in a way that we have rarely, if ever, seen quarterbacks play. That's exactly very different way, but that's sort of the structure, the bones of what Mahomes did last year. Mahomes, threw for 5,000 yards, obviously last year, and now it's just kind of barely over 4,000. But so I feel like he has been passed over. Deshaun Watson, with the ridiculous plays that he made in that win over the Bills. And look, those two guys are incredibly talented, and I think people would be surprised if those two guys aren't among the best quarterbacks in the NFL for the next decade. All that said, a lot of the focus has been on those two guys, and Patrick has been not forgotten, but sort of passed over in the discussion. And to me, what's really interesting is that he has been so much better than you would think just looking at that sort of thing on the surface. If you look at his 13 full games, so not take out the Denver game, I think he finished with like 76 yards in that game. If you
played half the game.
Yeah, if you do those 13 full games, prorated over 16 game season, he threw for I think 4,867 yards would be the full season. That's really close to the 5,000, right? If you look at QBR, if you look at Football Outsiders metrics, if you look at some of these things, he's been basically as good this year as he has been last year. Here's the really interesting thing and look, it's a small sample size, I get it, but in the 2 games that they've been fully healthy, offensive line playmakers, they have scored at a higher rate and they've scored more points per possession than they did last year. So this is, and Vahe, you've written a lot about this and we've talked about this, and I quoted that was a great column that you wrote with Andy, and about how Patrick, his numbers are a little bit diminished, but he's having a better year. And that speaks to that because they haven't had to score as often, right? Because the defense has been so good. But it's really interesting to me that this guy, when they're fully healthy, he has led his offense to more points per possession and more, sort of scoring possessions in total than they did last year. And nobody's talking about it. And now that thing is supported by a really good defense. It's setting up really nicely for them.
Just a thing I wanted to ask you, and you drilled deeper on some of these things. I was trying to study this, and I couldn't quite figure out a time of possession metric, a scoring time of possession metric, on whether it's, longer in my mind, longer drives or longer time off the clock.
It sure seems like
it does seem like it.
And this was one of the points you made, like one of the points that Andy made for you in your column, right? That defenses are playing really just number 1, 2, 3 priorities are to take away the deep pass, which in itself can lead to longer drives because now you're going to pick them apart underneath. I mean, how many plays last year, right, where they're just long touchdowns? And I thought Andy had a great point in your column about the Chargers, and I think he's probably exaggerating to make a point, but basically the Chargers made like one play where they weren't, taking the top off, and they killed him for that 47-yard pass to Tyreek.
I think about Mahomes' first touchdown pass of his career was the slant to Tyreek Hill that went for 65 yards or whatever against the Chargers 2 years ago. And you just haven't seen, I think about the first one this year was the Sammy Watkins touchdown reception. Yeah. But you just haven't seen many of those types of first series, first set of downs, touchdowns, because he caught the defense off guard.
They did do that same route that Watkins ran for that touchdown against Jacksonville, sort of like leak route or drag and go. You can call it different things, where it's kind of a cross and then you go. Mm-hmm. The only other time that I can remember that going for a touchdown was it was Tyreek, but it was Matt Moore as the quarterback
at Denver,
in that Denver game. It's a great route. I'd be relatively surprised if we don't see that again at some point in the postseason.
You guys think that we'll see a little more creativity, a little playbook creativity this weekend? Has Andy Reid been holding stuff back? Should he? I mean, is that? It wasn't like they still needed to continue to win throughout the regular. It's not like they had this thing clinched in week 14. They had to keep trying to win games toward the end of the season. Does Andy still have something up his sleeve, though, that we might see in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think he absolutely will. I mean, when you think of some of the great offensive minds in the National Football League, your Josh McDaniels in New England, your Sean McVay in Los Angeles, Sean Payton, and Sam knew I was going to drop this one, Sean Payton in New Orleans, and even Andy Reid. These guys are brilliant. You don't necessarily it doesn't even necessarily have to be new. It could be something they used 5-6 years ago that you don't see on tape anymore, because most teams will go back 3 or 4 games when they're reviewing the tape, and then they also have a template of what to expect from a coach. Obviously, the Houston Texans are reviewing what happened in Week 6, But I don't know how you guys felt about this, but I felt like in the regular season finale, it was kind of vanilla.
Yeah.
I didn't really, we didn't see a lot of creativity out of the Chiefs offense. They just pretty much stuck to something very simple. And that's probably designed so you don't give the Texans something to look at. It wouldn't surprise me if you see something new, some new wrinkles this weekend.
Patrick Mahomes said yesterday that they've been practicing plays all year that they haven't run yet. So we'll see something that we haven't seen yet.
The last time that an Andy Reid protege made it to and won a Super Bowl, they ran the Philly special, right? That they hadn't run before. Like I don't think Andy Reid, like maybe I'm just too fanboy on Andy Reid in this part, but like I don't think his like creativity is just limited to 16 games.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like he's got enough that he can empty the bag here a little bit. And like, Kansas City special, maybe we'll see it.
You know, Andy's a pretty humble guy, I think, right? I mean, he doesn't thump his chest, but every once in a while he does feel kind of the need to drop in that, you know, we've got 7,000 plays and we can dial. We got more. I mean, he said that it sort of earlier for effect, maybe about a month ago. Just drop that in there, and I think that's very true.
I think part of the
7,000.
Well, I think he said 200, but
I think one of the things about Andy Reid's offense is I'm not sure how number of plays are in the Chiefs playbook, but I think there are 20 variations for every play.
Absolutely.
Bingo.
Different formations.
Different formations. You line up the tight end, or you put somebody in motion, and it may be the same play, but it gives them a different look, and that's what confuses it. You think you've got a team Chiefs scouted, and based on formation, and then all of a sudden they shift something, and it could be the very same play with just a different look.
no team would share a playbook with you, obviously. But if you really did all the numbers, all the possibilities within each play, right after the formation changes, you can run them from different formations, different options within the play. It probably is something like 7,000 different things they could do to you. I mean,
There's sight reads and all kinds
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
All right, Sam McDowell, we're going to read a story about Chris Jones.
Yeah.
And what an interesting guy with an interesting background, and you went to Mississippi
Yeah.
to talk to him. What did you discover about Chris Jones?
A lot. It's probably kind of tough to describe without giving everything away, but he is from small town Mississippi. Population of, I think, 3,700. Didn't play football until sophomore year of high school because he couldn't afford it. And there's just a lot more in his background, stuff that continues to weigh on him today with his dad. And like I said, I don't want to give the whole thing away, but there's definitely some issues that he has to currently deal with while he's having this first career Pro Bowl season. He's led the Chiefs in sacks 2 years running, and I think a lot of times we look at these guys as kind of what they do on the football field. And this tells you that there's a lot more going on with him off the football field. So while it's about an NFL player, it's very little. The story is very little actually about the football on the field.
Seems being humble. It might be the best story that we've had on the Chiefs in quite a while. You should absolutely read it.
He's such a good athlete. Basketball was a big part of his background. Wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we see him play basketball.
As we continue to see in the locker room, right?
Yeah, we see some basketball, almost half brawls every day in the locker room. So, but he played basketball.
He took a spill yesterday,
Did
and he's on the ground, and for a moment, whoever was standing next to me thought it was his ankle had twisted off, but it was a shoe.
Okay.
He almost took out Armani Watts on a fadeaway jumper.
My story's safe, though.
Get that thing posted.
He played basketball his entire life. There's a basketball court actually right behind his grandma's house where he grew up. And he kind of thought he was going to be an NBA player, told teachers he was going to be an NBA player, and then started playing football, basically, and realized how good he was at it.
How important has he been to the Chiefs this year? Basically going from outside to inside with the acquisition of Frank Clark and the acquisition of Alex Okafor and Emmanuel Ogbah, the development of Tano Passanio. That's given the Chiefs the ability to move him inside and let him kind of do the thing he does best, and that's get to the quarterback.
Yeah, I always think that if you've got an NFL defensive line, you kind of rely on those outside guys to pressure the quarterback, and anything you can get from the interior is bonus. And they've gotten 24.5 sacks from him in the last 2 seasons, and I know he has played outside a little bit, a lot in that Vikings game when they were missing more guys, but now that they have Suggs back, they've put him more on the interior. And if you can get the outside guys to move the quarterback up in the pocket, I mean, that's how the Broncos won a Super Bowl a few years ago, was because Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware were so good on the outside that I think it was Malik Jackson was able to get a lot of pressure on the interior, and that's kind of the setup that the Chiefs envision.
He's too quick, and he's got multiple moves. You know, you can't just sit on a spin or sit on a, you know, like, I mean, he's he's too much on the interior for those guys.
But one thing about playing the Texans, and then if they win, playing either the Ravens or the Titans, is the Chiefs are going to have to be stout in the middle, right?
Yeah.
And because all those teams have pretty good running games, especially in that other game. The Texans rushed for, what was it, 192?
192.
Yeah. 192.
And 3 touchdowns.
Yes. Look, so Chris Jones, huge impact for this team, terrific player. I think he will continue to be a Chief, whether it's with the franchise tag. But I think for the playoffs, for the at least this game on Sunday, and then possibly the AFC Championship game, rush defense is pretty important for the Chiefs. What do you think, Herb?
Oh, absolutely. Because what you want to do is you can turn the Texans into one-dimensional team. And the Chiefs' pass defense is just ridiculously good. I'm going to throw a stat at you. This is actually from my section story, but they've allowed just one wide receiver to top 100 yards receiving in a single game this year. And it's interesting because the Chiefs players know it, too. I walked up to Charvarius Ward yesterday. I was like, I'm going to throw a stat at you. You guys only allowed one wide receiver to have 100 yards. You know who it is? He was like, oh, DJ Chark, week 1. Oh, they're well aware of that. And that is a stat to be proud of. Yes, it's 4 total have hit 100 yards, but their ability to shut down wide receivers is tremendous, and they can do that again here. DeAndre Hopkins is a 3-time All-Pro, 3 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons. He had 9 catches for 55 yards on 12 targets against the Chiefs back in week 6. That averages out to 6.1 yards per catch. They can shut down the outside. You can shut down the outside. Now you turn the Texans into a one-dimensional team, and you have a guy you have 2 players on defense who did not play that first time around, and they are essential in the middle of the defense. Chris Jones and Anthony Hitchens. Turn them into a one-dimensional team. You've got Suggs on the outside now, who is really effective at sealing the edge there. Maintain your gap discipline and keep Deshaun Watson in front of you. They can do it.
I tell you what, that's why I think one of the important players that's going to get a lot of the Chiefs' attention on defense is Duke Johnson. Yeah. Just his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, which has been something throughout the season that the Chiefs have had an issue with. Mm-hmm. He's not a 100-yard rusher type of guy like Carlos Hyde was, had 116 against the Chiefs in the regular season game, but Duke Johnson touched the ball 6 times in the Bills win and averaged about 12 yards per touch, rushing and receiving. That guy, he's a good player and a little bit of an under-the-radar guy, I think, for the Texans. We talk about Hopkins and Fuller and Deshaun Watson and Carlos Hyde, but I don't know. Duke Johnson, man, that's the guy I think the Chiefs really need to pay attention to.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of Austin Eckler. You know, Eckler gashed the Chiefs for 100 yards receiving in Mexico City, but they contained him. They did a very good job of containing him in the regular season finale. The Chiefs, this defense, the 5 of us can't overstate this enough. This is a completely different defense from what we saw at the start of the season. They have the tools in place to match up well against the Texans.
Okay. All right, so we have come to that part of the show, your favorite part of the show. It's called Where the Rubber Meets the Road. It's where we pick a player we think the Chiefs will need to come up big, will have an impact on the game Sunday. And I don't know if we've been keeping score on this, but Sam McDowell has been nailing it.
Have I? Okay.
Yeah, you have.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah. So I think we should start with you.
Okay.
Because of this, because I know what you do. I come to you last, and you just sort of filter through what everybody else says. So we usually have an additional question for that, and so the additional question today is going to be: I was talking to and a story that I'll write later today. I was talking to an odds maker about the Chiefs and postseason play. The Chiefs, Sam, you mentioned this earlier about the Chiefs' postseason history, and we spent a lot of time last week talking about the misfortunes, the misfortunes of Chiefs in the postseason. The Chiefs have lost, I want to say, 4 of the 5 playoff losses under Andy Reid have come with the Chiefs as the favorite in that game. Betting favorite, right?
New England, the exception.
Yeah, New England in
couple years
2015,
ago.
right?
Yeah.
So, they beat even when they played the Colts in 2013, the Chiefs were a slight favorite in that game, right? 2013. So Steelers, Titans, Patriots last year, they were a 3-point favorite. So, I mean, they lose in the most gut-wrenching way, right? It's not just that they lose, how they lose. So I was talking to this odds maker about Chiefs and postseason, and so what he did is he provided me with an over/under on how many years he thinks it'll take for the Chiefs to win a Super Bowl, and he set that at the year 2022. So what I'll ask you
The
is
season,
the
2022?
2022 season.
Okay.
Chiefs will have won a Super Bowl. And we include the 2022 season. So this season plus 3 more, right? Or, 2021, 22. Will the Chiefs have won a Super Bowl by the 2022 season? So kind of an over/under, right? If you take the under, that means you think the Chiefs will accomplish that. If you take the over, it'll be longer than 2022. Now, given the fact that the Chiefs haven't won a Super Bowl in 50 years, there's a little bit of history against them here. But so that'll be the second part of the question. Who is your rubber meets the road player for the Chiefs this weekend? And over/under Chiefs winning the Super Bowl 2022, Sam McDowell.
The player this week, I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill. The Texans' weakness, I think, is in their secondary. They're also kind of banged up a little bit there. They're, I think, 28th against the pass this year in the NFL. Yeah. So Tyreek Hill tore him up despite playing, 50% of the snaps in their first meeting.
Yeah.
I don't think they have a guy that can cover Tyreek Hill. And so I also don't think that they have the same sort of scheme that the Patriots do, to where they have the ability to take him away with the way they scheme against him. So if they do, I think they're going to expose themselves in so many other areas that I don't think it's really worth it. So I think Tyreek Hill's going to have a big day. I'm going to take the under.
So Chiefs win a Super Bowl sometime in the next basically 4 years, right? 4 opportunities.
Yeah.
This year and then 3 after that. Okay.
So old takes exposed can come back at you.
All right, Herbie, you're next.
I'm going to go Chris Jones. I think what you saw with Deshaun Watson against the Bills is not going to happen against this Chiefs defense, where he bounced off of 2 defenders back there. Jones is going to be able to wrap him up. Suggs is going to be able to wrap him up. Hitchens will be able to wrap him up. So Jones is my where the rubber meets the road player. I'm also going to take the under. You got to take a look at the foundation that the Chiefs have right now. Travis Kelce, 4 years from now, is he still going to be operating at a high level? Tyreek Hill, receivers in their prime right now. Running backs, maybe they address that. I know a lot of people like Damian Williams, but I like to see them add a bona fide stud back there. The defense is young. This is the time to do it. You got 3 to 4 years to win a Super Bowl. The Chiefs are going to bank it. They're going to take it home.
All right, before we continue, let me a little bit of a clarification on the over/under question. It wasn't just that the Chiefs would win a Super Bowl, it's whether the Chiefs would win a Super Bowl or the Royals a World Series. It was the Kansas City Pro Sports team winning a championship by 22. So does that change?
No.
Okay. So, Sam, what do you think?
I mean, I'd be really surprised if the Royals part of that bet cashes in by 2022. Yeah. I feel like that over/under is a complete trap for people to bet the under. That said, I will take the under. I think this team is just really set up they've got a stable infrastructure with coaching, with a front office that has filled out the roster. Most importantly, with a 24-year-old reigning MVP quarterback. I think that's the kind of thing where you knock on the door often enough, it's going to open. In the spirit of kind of avoiding the rubber meets the road question, I'm going to take.
Let me guess. War paint.
I'm going to take Mike Pennell as a sort of representative of the run defense. I think that we talked about it. Herbie brought it up. 192 and 3 touchdowns the first time they played. This is a completely different defense. I think we all accept that. And Mike Pennell is a very, I think, good representative of how they're different. I feel like Frank Clark, Terrell Suggs can set the edges, and so then it becomes up to Pennell, Chris Jones, who's, if he has a weakness, it's against the run. But Pennell is the run stopper there. Him, whether it's Hitchens, Ragland, whoever is playing behind him, I think that's sort of where they're either this is gonna be a potential blowout, or it's gonna be a much closer game.
Okay. What do you think, Brian?
Tyrann Mathieu against his former team.
Big six.
Sorry.
While we're rolling, on the over/under question. First of all, I love what each of these guys have said about the reasoning for taking the under, and I'm completely on board with that. You can see sort of the foreground of what's here a lot easier than you can see the horizon, right? I mean, and the knowns are, I think, pretty good, and I feel like this is the peak time, the next 3 or 4 years. After a couple of years from now, 4 or 5 years from now, Andy's going to be 65, 66. Is he? How long does he want to coach? How much is changing? Second contracts, et cetera. My guy is not Tyrann Mathieu this week. It's Mecole Hardman. I think that they've been getting him closer and closer to more primetime exposure, and I think he's an example of the sort of thing that can come out from under wraps a little bit. And I agree again with the reasoning on Tyreek, for instance, but I think the Texans are going to do everything they can to drape themselves over him, and I think it's going to leave room for somebody else to be a secondary force. And somehow I still find myself surprised every time we see the Mecole Hardman burst, and it's only a step behind Tyreek Hill, if that.
If he were trying to chase down Damian Williams, he would get there as well, is what you're
I think he would, although Tyreek suggested he would have caught Mecole on the 104-yard return, and he would have passed him and given him the deuces.
I'd pay money to see that one.
That needs to happen.
Yeah,
doesn't it? That one needs to happen. I'm going to go rubber meets the road. I'm going to stay on the defense, following a couple of them. I'm going to go Daniel Sorensen. And we talked about Armani Watts and Kendall and how they're going to need to, kind of step up. But I think Daniel Sorensen's going to. I think he's going to be the spy. I think he'll be the Deshaun Watson spy in this game. It'll be his job to help contain Watson. And so I'm going to go Daniel Sorensen. I think he's had a pretty nice season. Really nice bounce back from last year, where he was just exposed, quite often last year. But so Sorensen, and of course the under on the Chiefs. I agree with everything that these guys have said. That this is the window of opportunity for the Chiefs. Even though if they win and the Ravens win, they got to go to Baltimore. They'll be a 3 or 4 point underdog, I think, in that game.
I would think at least, yep.
Yep. And so they'll have to do something that they don't often do, win a playoff game. But I'm gonna say yes on the Chiefs. Hey, before we go, one topic we didn't cover that I think will be a subject of a story here. Eric Bieniemy, head coaching job. Let's just say doesn't look like it's going to happen for him this year unless the Cleveland Browns pull off an upset and hire him, which I actually think would be a pretty good place for Eric Bieniemy. But will Eric Bieniemy be a head coach by the end of next season? Because it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. Washington, Carolina, New York Giants, Cleveland Browns all opened up, and he's still and he interviewed and the Cowboys, right? So 5 jobs. He interviewed for several of them.
3 that we know of.
Yeah.
This year.
And didn't get jobs. So will Bieniemy be a head coach by the end of the 2020 season?
That's the $1 million question, because to me it's a head scratcher that Bieniemy has not been hired. I know, like with Judge in New York, they called Bill Belichick, and Belichick gave a ringing endorsement. But to me, when you have Andy Reid publicly giving Bieniemy a ringing endorsement, he's a leader of men. He can motivate a team, and we've all been around Bieniemy. He's a fiery kind of guy. He seems to me like a coach's kind of player. A lot of players who didn't even play for him were taking to Twitter. Reggie Bush tweeted out, he's ready for a head coach job. I know this guy. I don't know if he's going to have a job, because I thought he'd have a job this year. I thought we would all be writing about Team X hires Eric Bieniemy, Chiefs now looking for another offensive coordinator. So I don't know. I don't know what the teams are looking for. If you're looking for a leader, why hasn't Bieniemy had a job yet?
How about the idea of, Chiefs win the Super Bowl this year, right. Andy Reid steps down, Eric Bieniemy becomes the head coach.
Are you putting that
Sam will not dignify that.
I don't see that happening.
Okay.
But I agree with Herbie. I mean, and also with your point about the Cleveland Browns. While it may not be the best spot for him, because I don't think that's the best spot for anybody.
Right, for any human.
It might be one of their best options, because the quality that Andy Reid keeps talking about is this leader of men phrase, and of course what does that really mean? But he's got a presence with those players, and Cleveland needs somebody that has a presence with those players, because they need some discipline. And I think Eric Bieniemy would provide that, if nothing else. And I know that there's the question of, he doesn't call the plays, so how much does he really factor into the offense? But you've had other guys that had that same question. I mean, Doug Peterson went out and won a Super Bowl.
Andy Reid never called plays.
Exactly.
when he got his job.
He was never even a coordinator.
Yeah, but
Right.
Doug
Right.
Peterson is, that's the example to me. The guy knows offense, and if you talk to whether it's Mahomes or Matt Moore or Chad Henne, he's working with the quarterbacks. Like it's not just he's still the running backs coach, and that's it. And I keep going back to the Kareem Hunt situation, and because it's coaches can present this veneer of discipline, of authority, and all that stuff. But what happens when that gets challenged? What happens when you set a line and somebody steps over it? That was a star player, an important piece of the offense, and he was gone because of what happened with Eric Bieniemy and Kareem Hunt. That Kareem Hunt lied to Eric Bieniemy. That's why he's gone. And I think that's the part too. When you can bring the hammer and still have the players talk about you the way they talk about Eric, I mean that's gold. And I would just underline what Herbie and Sam both said about, like, doesn't it seem like that's what the Cleveland Browns need?
Yes.
And now I'm forgetting. I think Sam, you just said it. Like, I don't know if it's Eric's best spot because I don't know if you want to work for that owner. If you just look at the history that they've had with GMs and coaches both, but they got a good quarterback. They got a hell of a lot of talent around them. They've got Kareem Hunt. That would be an interesting sort of sub-story or whatever. So it'd be a great situation for the Browns, I think. But it's just like we're nobody's mentioned it yet, but there's a fact that black coaches are not getting hired at near the rates that white coaches are.
Especially offensive.
Yes, and I don't know. I don't think there's outright racism. I don't think that. But I think that there is a case to be made that there is a subconscious, sort of boys network, look like me kind of thing. I mean, that's how it's happened. Whether it's direct or indirect, that's part of this equation as well.
Sam made this point we were talking the other day. I mean, you might look at each individual case and say, okay, you can see why they made that choice. But when you take the whole body of it, it's 7 interviews now.
In 2 years.
In 2 years.
7 out of 31 teams.
And I guess we don't rule out that he might get the Cleveland thing until that is ruled out. But so then you look at what his profile is, and 2 things on his profile that are different, I guess, are the race, but also running backs history as opposed to quarterbacks history before these last 2 years, right? Peterson had been a quarterback. He'd worked with quarterbacks. He'd been an offensive coordinator. Nagy had worked with quarterbacks before he was coordinator. Which one of these you want to choose as a reason, at least on the profile? And I think you can see what you want to in it, but it's hard not to be distressed a little bit about the rate of hiring of African American coaches.
Right. The other thing you hear is no head coaching experience either at the college or pro level, but
Come on.
yeah, that's not a reason anymore.
Guys
you
are
can't
getting,
use that.
Yeah, guys are getting jobs from being a quarterbacks coach or a special teams coordinator. I mean, there's look like Ron Rivera and Bruce Arians, Mike McCarthy. I mean, there have been it seems like somewhat more retreads or guys getting a second chance, but there's still Joe Judge. Nobody had ever heard of him before.
We had to Google him.
Zach Taylor. I mean, there's a lot of examples.
Cliff.
Cliff Kingsbury got fired. Just a failed college coach that went below 500, and now an NFL. That's amazing.
Didn't win with Patrick Mahomes.
And that's the thing too. Is like I feel like there's some of some of what you see is, well, of course Bieniemy's the offensive coordinator of this offense has been terrific. He's got Patrick Mahomes. Well, so did Kingsbury.
Right.
And the Big 12's not as tough as the NFL.
Well, I'd love to see Eric Bieniemy and Dave Toub someday become NFL head coaches. Both of them absolutely deserve it. So that's going to do it for us today. We got to get to Chiefs practice. Thanks so much for tuning in. We got to thank Jack is here, one of our great fans, and Ann came too. Sarah and Mike were here today, and Beth Welsh is here today. And what's special about Beth? Well, everything, because she's here every week. But today is her birthday.
Is that right?
It is.
Happy birthday, Beth.
Happy birthday to you.
Do you want some candy corn?
So from all of us, we will talk to you again after the Chiefs game on Sunday. Take care.